Welcome to Workshop Wednesday. Today we're going to look at how to use a viewfinder. We're going to place it on some existing artwork and try to narrow it down to see what makes a great composition for an enlargement. And then we're going to look at how do we look through the viewfinder at those lines to make our image even bigger and turn it into a great piece of artwork.
Today we're going to talk about the viewfinder. In your packet of papers and supplies that you were provided, you should have a sheet that looks like this. And this is two smaller viewfinders and a larger one. And so in this case, you're probably going to use the larger one. So just cut this apart like this. And we need to cut the center out. And the easiest way to do that is if you hold this up, and you can hold it up to the light and line those lines up in that light. You can see through that. And then just crease it. And then you can just clip this side, clip this side, and then you can just pull this back or pull it up, and then clip along that side. Okay, so you have that center section cut out, you open it up, and now you have a viewfinder. And so when we do still lifes, you're going to use the smaller one so you can hold it up and look through it, and it helps define the area that you're going to draw. Well, in this case, the larger one, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to look at one of your contour lines that you drew. So let's say you drew flowers. Okay, here's some flowers. So what you're going to do next for this part, we're going to enlarge a section. And a lot of times we refer to George O'Keeffe, the artist. You may look her up. She is known for enlarging, enhancing things really big and doing them close up. And that's kind of what we're doing here, that kind of style. So what you want to do is lay your viewfinder on your drawing, the one that you picked out, because you'll have multiple of them that you did, so you decide what you liked for your final, and then you're going to lay this on there. Oh, that looks really nice. So see, any way I turn that at an angle, that composition is nice because I have these leaves, I have the stem that flows through here, and then the petals, a little bit of space, and the layout looks really good. So notice I turned it at an angle. Had I put it straight on, not quite as interesting because I have something on this half and something on this half. By slightly tilting it at an angle, like so, that becomes a lot more interesting. These over here, pretty tight, pretty congested, kind of hard to tell what it is. So just keep rotating and turning it. You might have another option. Yeah, there's one. It's not too bad, but this is very congested, and then you have this single thing sticking up. So it's okay, mostly because it's lower on this side, higher on this side. If I did it where it was equal on the bottom, not so well organized, because this is a stripe across the bottom, and this is dead center of our whole composition. So try to offset that a little bit where it's not dead center, kind of off on the side. What you'll find is we're going to talk about focal points. And what we do is we talk about the rule of thirds. And a rule of thirds is if I take and divide this into three sections, top, middle, bottom, and do the same thing here. I have a right, a center, and a left. So where all those lines would cross is where you'd want a focal point. So in this case, we do have a focal point there. Let's go back and check this one. So having it, with the curve like we talked about. Okay. So keep in mind the rule of thirds. So I do have a focal point here, and I kind of have one over here, a little bit of leaf here. So when we talk about those intersections there, I have a focal point. What we don't want to do is do this where it's dead center of the paper. Not quite as interesting. All right, so that would be a flower. let's try this one. This was a skull. So this would be a real abstract kind of design. Same thing. We really wouldn't be able to tell what they are, but it's about an abstraction of space. Same thing. If I take it like this, I'm putting something straight in the middle. We want to try to not do that. So if I turn it, I could do something like this. It almost looks like hills and valleys instead of a skull. And I could change the different values as it goes back, aerial perspective, and make those values fade into the sky. That would be interesting. See if there's something else on this one. Well, this is interesting. Notice I didn't put that dead center. See, if I raise it up, it's dead center. Not quite as interesting, but I can lower that a little bit and raise it up. I also could put it offset to one of the sides, and it'd be where the focal point is that we just talked about. I could go to the other side. You could do that as well, and this would be interesting. So then what you would do is you're going to take your plain paper. Okay, notice that this right now is vertical and my paper is horizontal. So I need to make sure that I turn my paper to match my viewfinder. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look and see where this line starts. Okay, it comes in off this side. This is about a half, third, it's about less than a fourth. So I can find the half, the half, and the fourth, and that line would come in about here. So I would follow that line best of my ability. I'd look how high it comes before it would come off the paper. There's another line next to it. So what I'm doing is I'm taking this smaller portion and I'm going to enlarge it to this paper. I'm going to follow this line, kind of just like what we did when we did contour line, but now we're creating a composition for a painting. Okay, so you would do that whole thing for this whole section on fill your paper, and then you'll be ready to come back and paint in those sections. We talked about composition and how to lay this out, and now you've enlarged your drawing. So I'm going to show you what some of those will look like. These are previous ones that students have done. So here's this, and then it would have been enlarged. Here's another one, and this is about what they chose to enlarge, which is reflected in this painting. And I can't quite get all of it in to the screen here, but you get the idea. So they have enlarged this little portion here onto this bigger paper. And what we've done is for this one, we made black Elmer's glue by putting black acrylic paint in Elmer's glue bottle and outlined it. If you do that, you have to wait and let it dry 24 hours before you come in and paint those sections. But when you don't have black paint or Elmer's glue, what you can do is carefully go in and paint all the sections and then come back after it's dry, and you can use a black Sharpie or a black ink pen if you don't have a Sharpie, and try to outline those edges and define those a little bit more. Okay, but if you are painting, what you want to do is you want to do a little section at a time. So if I was coming in and starting to paint this, I wouldn't want to come in and paint all of this the same color. What you want to do is show some value changes. And in some areas, it's a little more predominant and you can see it. So like the back of this petal is a different value than the inside of this petal. So you would want to paint one portion of this first, let it dry, and then come back and paint this section. Because what happens is, if you have something wet and you put something else wet next to it, they're going to run together. So make sure that when you go in to paint, that you're just painting one section at a time. So you could paint this one. This one's the same color. I might come in with a smaller brush and paint this one, or this one, and this one. So just kind of skip every other section as you're painting. Let those dry, and then come back and paint these. Now remember your watercolor techniques. So the best way to get colors to blend, see how these are blended real nicely and not look striped? This is a little more striped. So getting this to blend, you want to use a wet on wet technique. Wet on wet is where you put the brush in the water, clean water, and you wet the section, and then you get your paint and you lay your paint in there and blend it and let it flow into one another. And you'll get this nice smooth blending of color. If you wet your paper too much, then it's going to run. So you want to make sure that you have a nice flat area that you can leave this laying to let it dry so it doesn't do that. So wet on wet is a great technique, especially if you're going to do a large area like this background. You want to make sure that you wet that and then you come in quickly with your values and get those brushed out. Also remember, if you want a value to get lighter, you use less pigment and more water. So you will thin out your watercolor and use more water with just a tint of color in there. And that will make that lighter as it goes up. Okay, so give it a try. See what happens. I highly recommend that you practice on scrap watercolor paper first to see what it's going to look like, and then actually apply it to your final DCA that you're working on. Do your best. We're just looking for you to try your best and do what you can. We know at this point it won't be perfection, and if you have any concerns or issues or something happens, feel free to email your teacher. If you're virtual or if you're in person, make sure that you raise your hand, you ask your teacher, we'll help you fix it. There's little ways, if you have a line and you're trying to blend it, there's little ways you can clean your brush, have it slightly damp, and then you can lay your brush on there and you can kind of lift. So some of these brushes, because they're nylon, you can lift pigment and color out, but sometimes after it's set, it's a little harder to do. So be sure to ask if you have any questions. You can send a picture of it if you're virtual and let your teacher see what happened and let them walk you through how to fix it. Don't get discouraged. Just try to persevere and work through it and stay encouraged. I'm sure you'll do fabulous.